is episode 90 of the Real World Wellness Podcast. Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Lehman, a nutritional therapy practitioner and the reverse diabetes coach, which is also the name of my website. I see clients in person and by Skype video. You can reach me on my website. Again, that's reversediabetescoach.com, and use the contact form, please. So today we're going to continue on our conversation about thyroid health. And this is part 2 of a 2-part series. And today we're going to cover Hashimoto's disease and Graves' disease with Stephanie Ewals, who's also a nutritional therapy practitioner, my former co-host, and who has personal experience with Hashimoto's. She also answers a listener question at the end. So stay tuned, and I hope you enjoy the program.
We're talking about Hashimoto's and Graves' disease today, which are both autoimmune diseases that affect the thyroid gland. I personally have Hashimoto's and have an aunt and an uncle on the same side of the family with Graves' disease. Everybody on that side of the family, all the immediate family, have thyroid issues of one form or another.
Which I think is really interesting because it suggests there is a genetic component. Do you agree with that?
There is a genetic component for sure. I definitely was more susceptible to getting thyroid disease because of that. But the thing that people need to remember is you can have the genes. It's whether or not you turn them on. And I obviously did that with my, diet and lifestyle choices over the years. So they are both autoimmune diseases, and you also need to remember that this doesn't necessarily mean there is a problem with the thyroid. The problem lies within the immune system. Something has caused your immune system to attack your own tissues, and for everyone with an autoimmune disease, it is a big puzzle to figure out because the cause of my autoimmune disease will not be the cause of yours. Mm-hmm. And in Hashimoto's thyroiditis, the tissues of the thyroid gland are being attacked, causing your thyroid to be underactive. It is possible for you to have symptoms of both hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism when you have Hashimoto's. And this is because the die-off of the tissue due to the attack causes more hormone to be released into the system and produce hyperthyroid symptoms. So rather than seek a Band-Aid for treatment, meaning something like an immunosuppressant, which does help some people, but I don't believe it should be your first choice. You should ask yourself, why is this happening? Why is my body attacking itself? And there are many reasons your immune system goes on attack, but it is different for each person. So it can often be related to a virus or a parasite that you may have had long ago, and then your diet and lifestyle choices play a role in chronic inflammation that leads to the immune system to be on high alert and eventually attack your own tissues. So we'll talk a little bit more about this later on. Hashimoto's can be diagnosed through ultrasound to look for the thyroid to be enlarged and changes in the tissue structure. Blood tests looking for antibodies like thyroid peroxidase antibodies and thyroglobulin antibodies. Those are more common, and that's how I was diagnosed. And as in the case with many autoimmune diseases, the antibodies can be present long before enough tissue damage is done to give a diagnosis of Hashimoto's or before a change in TSH shows up on the blood work.
I was just wondering if you can explain what antibodies are. Just, this is kind of basic, medical kind of terms for people. So in lay language, how would you explain what an antibody is?
That's a good question. So it basically something your body produces, and it's a protein that's in the blood, and it's produced by the immune system. It's sort of like a soldier, if you will, that is on the lookout within your body for foreign material, such as bacteria, viruses, or anything foreign in the blood. And that's where kind of leaky gut comes into play. These antibodies are out looking for things that don't belong so that they can alert the rest of your immune system to go on attack or to be ready to fight. And if you have a leaky gut, which I know we've talked about, and that's where your small intestine is permeable and things go into your bloodstream. So if you're eating something, you don't fully digest it, you get a little food particle, leaks into your blood bloodstream, and just say gluten, for example, because that's one that everybody is really familiar with. So you get a little bit of gluten into your bloodstream, your body, antibodies, look at that and say, well, you don't belong here. I think we need to get you out. So we're going to launch an attack on that. And the funny thing is, it's not really funny, it's really kind of a bummer. The proteins in your thyroid gland are similar to the proteins in gluten, and your body mistakes the proteins in your thyroid gland for gluten. And that's one of the main issues, in my opinion, with Hashimoto's, is that continuing to eat gluten will continue the immune attack on your thyroid gland and destroy tissues.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
The antibodies, like we said, can be present long before that the tissue damage occurs, and that's where your diet and lifestyle choices come into play. So some of the common symptoms of Hashimoto's are those of hypothyroidism, such as slow metabolism, inability to lose weight, foggy thinking, poor memory, no ambition, feeling of being cold, depression, fatigue, constipation, hair loss, joint pain. And a big one is the loss of the outer third of the eyebrows. I've never personally had that problem. I've had just about everything else, but if you are missing the outer third of your eyebrows, it's a good indication that you probably have some thyroid issues. Irregular periods, infertility is a big one too, and muscle weakness.
Yeah, it sounds quite debilitating.
It can be, yeah.
And then I also read that another symptom could be a goiter, which isn't that sort of a large, bulging, almost ball, like in your around where your thyroid gland is, which is in your
you can develop nodules and then a goiter. And did I explain this in the last episode, on episode 18? Did we talk about that? I think we did.
I don't remember the goiter coming up.
Might be on my website then, an article about it, because I can't pull exactly off the top of my head how that works. It must be an article I wrote.
That's okay. We can always provide a resource link.
Yeah, and you can check my website too for the last article I wrote on thyroid issues, because I know I did just write about that. So anyway.
It just seems like that would be a really obvious sign if you're having a thyroid
they don't
problem.
Usually do a whole lot with those. They just watch them.
Really?
Yeah. And iodine plays a role in goiter. Yeah, so with any autoimmune disease, it's quite common for someone to acquire more than one autoimmune disease. So if you have Hashimoto's, it's very possible that you could eventually end up with type 1 diabetes, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, celiac disease, lupus, Addison's disease, which is affecting your adrenal glands, and pernicious anemia, which affects the lining of your stomach and your ability to absorb iron. And there are others too, but those are some biggies. And people with thyroid problems often tend to have problems regulating their blood sugar, so type 1 diabetes is something that's possible.
And that, just to distinguish it from type 2, is when you're insulin dependent.
Yeah, right. And conventional treatments will put you on thyroid replacement hormones. Doctors will monitor your thyroid TSH levels every year and slowly increase your medication until you no longer have an operating thyroid. That's it, no treatment. Many endocrinologists don't believe there is a treatment for autoimmune disease. They just don't think there's anything you can do, so they leave it at that. There are plenty of people out there who can help you, and for me it was a naturopathic doctor. The only problem here is naturopathic doctors can't write prescriptions, so I still had to find a doctor that was willing to put me on the medication that I wanted to be on, which was also a struggle. And I've talked about that before. So Graves' disease is when the immune system makes antibodies that act like TSH, which is the thyroid stimulating hormone. And if you want a more in-depth understanding of the thyroid and that's what I'm talking about as far as TSH and that kind of thing, listen to episode 18 because we discussed it there in great detail. So Graves is when the immune system makes antibodies that act like TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone, and the body ends up making too much thyroid hormone. The antibody here that is made is called thyroid stimulating immunoglobulin, or TSI. And it's also the TSH receptor antibody. So our cells have little receptors. You can think of them like TV antennas on your house. Your cell is got many of those for many different things. So you have this receptor sticking out on your cell, probably not really, but figuratively, think of it that way. And this antibody attaches it to the cell receptor site, mimics TSH, and stimulates the thyroid gland to make more hormones. So that's kind of what's happening there in Graves' disease. Whereas Hashimoto's, the thyroid tissue is being destroyed. Graves' disease is a little tougher for people to manage if they don't try to do it with their diet and their lifestyle, because the drugs they use are really harsh. So we'll talk about that in a sec. Symptoms of Graves' disease are those of hyperthyroidism, so very much the opposite of what I talked about with Hashimoto's. You have nervousness, irritability, fatigue, or muscle weakness. You can't tolerate the heat. You have trouble sleeping. You get hand tremors, rapid and irregular heartbeat, frequent bowel movements or diarrhea, weight loss, and you can have an enlarged thyroid, which is called a goiter. So some of these symptoms can be in Hashimoto's as well, as I said, because you get that surge of thyroid hormone, so you kind of have this back and forth sometimes if you're causing a lot of damage to your thyroid gland. There can be complications with the eyes in some cases of Graves' disease, where the eyes can appear enlarged. And this occurs from damage to the tissues and muscles behind the eyes, leading to inflammation and causing the eyeballs to bulge out of the eye socket. This happened to my uncle years ago. He literally couldn't close his eyelids over his eyeballs. They were bulging out so much.
Oh,
so he couldn't sleep. I mean, his eyes were constantly dry. He ended up having to go to the Mayo Clinic, and they literally broke his face and somehow extended his eyelids so that he could close his eyelids again. I remember I think he stayed at our house. He lives in northern Minnesota, and Rochester's in the south end of Minnesota. So it's like an 8-hour drive from where he lives. So they stayed at our house. This was when I still was living at home. Stayed at my parents' house on the way there and on the way back, and he just really looked terrible after the surgery. But anyway, that did help him. But his autoimmune disease went untreated. They did nothing for it. And he's now got an autoimmune disease attacking his kidneys and is on immunosuppressants and chemotherapy drugs for that. So his life will be shortened because of that.
You know, when you mention immunosuppressants, I just want to make sure I understand the concept. It sounds like you're suppressing your immune system.
Yes.
That's the goal there.
Yeah, and that's more common, I think, with Graves' disease, because when you're hypothyroid, where your thyroid is slow, you usually don't have, you can have trouble sleeping, but with Graves, you can really have trouble sleeping, and you have this rapid heartbeat. I have had symptoms like that over the years, and it's almost, you feel like you've drank maybe like 25 espressos, and you're just jittery and feel really weird.
It's almost like you're on speed or something.
Yeah. So they can test this thyroid stimulating immunoglobulin, or TSI, and it can show antibodies to indicate Graves' disease. And what they do with that then is for my aunt, who had this happen just a few years ago, she was losing weight, not sleeping, she wouldn't sleep for 3 days. She went in and they discovered it was Graves. So the first thing they do is put you on this medication that slows your thyroid down. It actually is really pretty harsh, and they have to monitor you very closely, and you can't be on it for more than 3 months because it can severely damage your liver. They try that first. If that doesn't work to slow down the thyroid, they can put you on beta blockers, which are used to keep your heart from racing and reduce tremors and nervousness. They don't really do anything for your thyroid, but they'll help keep your heart from racing out of your chest. If that doesn't work, they just do a radioactive iodine to kill the thyroid or remove it with surgery. Those are really the only options if you don't try to do something like the autoimmune protocol first. And so for a holistic or functional nutrition perspective, there is a lot you can do to halt the immune attack and sometimes even reverse the condition. What you need to be thinking about is figuring out what caused the immune attack. There are pregnancy-induced thyroid problems, which is what happened with me, and other hormone balances from things like birth control pills. They deplete many of the minerals needed for proper thyroid function, which, they don't tell you when they suggest that as an option for most women in the world. They deplete selenium, zinc, B vitamins, and more. And they mess with the portion of your immune system that can lead to autoimmune disease. So I didn't want to go into too much detail in that because it would take up, a good chunk of our time. So just know that it messes with your immune system.
Right. And
go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's what I was just going to say.
Estrogen and progesterone imbalances also affect how your immune system operates. So when you're on birth control pills, that can be an issue because you're messing with your estrogen and progesterone levels. So
yeah, it sounds like a ripple effect.
It really is, yeah. And in fact, at one point, my doctor had me on an IUD, which is an intrauterine device to use for birth control. And then for heavy periods, she put me on a birth control pill as well. So rather than say, hey, let's figure out why you have such heavy periods, she was like, we can do this, and then she offered to remove my uterus rather than figure out why I had heavy periods.
Oh my God.
I know. So
yeah, I also read that Hashimoto's affects many times, like 7 times as many women as men. And then the suggestion, as you were just talking about, is that sex hormones play a role in that.
Yeah, I would think so. I haven't read any specific research on that, but it is really common for pregnancy-induced thyroid problems to happen. So after you've had a baby, when your hormones are all over the place, it happens quite frequently there. And that happened. All of my problems with my thyroid only occurred when I was carrying a boy.
Yeah. Huh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I have no research to back up my thoughts about that, but I think it's really odd that my thyroid, I went into a pretty serious thyroid storm when I was pregnant with my son that was stillborn, and then all of my thyroid problems started when my son that I have was born. And I was joking with him, it was last night or the night before, I always tell him it's all his fault that I am like this. And, just totally joking. I was tucking him in.
Right.
And I can't remember what I said because they always make fun of me and they tell me I'm crazy all the time. And so he said something about me being crazy. And I said, it's all your fault, So it's a running joke at our house.
That's right. He won't end up with the complex.
He may end up with thyroid problems, though. Other things that can cause the immune attack are viruses. So if you had Epstein-Barr, which is the virus that causes mono, that can have an effect on your immune system and causing autoimmune disease. And food intolerances will perpetuate the inflammation in the body and affect the immune system. So I talked a little bit before about the antibodies and leaky gut, and that's where the food intolerances come into play. You can develop food intolerances through having leaky gut, and then your body develops the antibodies. And the problem for those of us with that issue is that if you consume too much of one food for too long, you are more than likely going to develop an antibody to that food as well. So you have to keep your diet varied all the time.
Which is good advice anyway from a nutritional standpoint.
Yes, it really is. And it's tough for those of us who might have some food issues in our background, which we're going to talk about eventually on the podcast, the psychology of eating. I can't wait to dive into that topic. So other things that can affect your immune system and autoimmunity is toxins from our environment. So pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, things like that. They're in our food supply and in the soil. And if they're in the soil, they are in your food. So it's important to try to eat as clean a diet as you can. And GMOs, which is a very touchy subject, but they do have pesticides built right into some of the seeds that are grown that are put into the food supply, whether it's through feeding cattle that you consume or, whatever, through high fructose corn syrup and that kind of thing. Wheat has been hybridized to have more protein in it now, which makes it difficult for the body to digest. And if you have any issues with your gut at all, then that will cause a problem for you. Chemicals in your home and water supply can very much affect your immune system and thyroid issues. Bromide, chloride, and fluoride are all harmful to the thyroid. Fluoride, in fact, used to be used to treat hyperthyroidism or Graves up until the 50s because it actually will suppress or slow down your thyroid function.
So why did they stop using it?
Oh, because they came up with pharmaceuticals to do the job.
I see.
Yeah, that's the only reason.
Yeah, I also was reading that excess amounts of iodine found, it's a trace element, as you know, required by your body to make thyroid hormones that can trigger thyroid disease in susceptible people.
Yeah, and because, like I spoke about in episode 18, it's the Goldilocks element. You need to have just the right amount. So having too much or not enough can cause problems with your thyroid.
And then certain drugs also can trigger thyroid disease. Have you found that to be the case?
Yeah, some prescription medications, like as we talked about with birth control pills, because they're depleting things that need the thyroid or that the thyroid needs to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they can. But I don't have a list of any specific medications.
I also thought it was interesting that radiation exposure. Mm-hmm. There have been studies on people who've been exposed to radiation, and these are, of course, rather rare incidents, but the atomic bombs in Japan, the Chernobyl nuclear accident, and radiation treatment, actually, to treat a form of blood cancer called Hodgkin's disease, has been found to increase thyroid disease.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the things you want to do is clean up your beauty products as well. Your skin is the biggest organ we have and absorbs all you put on in a very quick amount or a very short time span. I think it's something like 22 seconds is what it takes for your skin to absorb something and have it go into your bloodstream. So you want to try to use the cleanest products you can, meaning less chemicals, more natural substances. And then cleaning up your environment will allow your body to detoxify itself more efficiently, allowing for things to run more smoothly throughout the body. And we talked a little bit about leaky gut or intestinal permeability. You want to heal your gut, and that is the one thing that all autoimmune diseases have in common. You want to eliminate food sensitivities by going on an elimination diet is really the easiest way to figure out what foods your body is sensitive to. And the autoimmune protocol is really ideal for this situation. And so you're doing the elimination diet, cleaning up the toxins in your diet in your home, figure out what nutritional deficiencies you may have, and you may need to see a practitioner to do that. And it's really much more involved than this, but more than we can go into in this short amount of time that we have.
And you specialize in this.
Yeah, I do specialize in this. So you can contact me to learn more about how you can halt your autoimmune issues that you may be having.
Exactly. Well, I always learn new things when I listen to you. And I know our listeners have some questions, so we want to get to those. And Deanne asks, says, I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism with Hashimoto's disease, and I have my first appointment with an endocrinologist soon. excuse me. I am 35 years old on 8 months postpartum with the baby number 2. And my TSH was over 100, and I was having symptoms of hair loss, brain fog, and joint pain. Any tips on what I should be asking about?
Yes, Deanne, thanks for your question. I don't often hear people saying they had a successful visit with their endocrinologist, so just be prepared for that. And I'm not bashing endocrinology or endocrinologists. They have a certain protocol they follow, and there's actually a shortage of endocrinologists in the U.S., so they don't have a lot of time to spend on each and every person that comes to see them. So just keep that in mind. They're not bad guys. They just don't have a lot of time. If you don't get anywhere with your endocrinologist, I would suggest seeking out a new doctor and possibly one who studies functional medicine. You need to remember that you are the customer. You or your insurance company are paying them for a service. So I think sometimes people forget that when they're going to the doctor's office. And some of us are tied to certain places because of our insurance, but you are paying them, so you do have some say in your care. So first of all, you want to be informed. Prepare for your appointment, but don't give your doctor a bunch of information that you may have compiled through reading things on the internet or in books on your condition. They don't have time to read it, and they don't have time to talk about it in your appointment. You can bring your records from another doctor, so the current doctor has them for reference if needed, but that isn't even necessary. You can write a list of your symptoms for the doctor to keep. Have a short list of questions and let them know what your goal is for your appointment. So, for you, your symptoms are hair loss, brain fog, and joint pain. You can let them know those are the things that are going on with you, and make sure you ask them to work with you based on how you're feeling and not just on your lab results. So, for example, you can say, I'm so fatigued, it is work for me to use my tongue, or I am so fatigued I find it difficult to hold a pen and write something. I would like to talk about medication options and would prefer to go on a natural desiccated thyroid hormone. I would like to have my TSH, free T3, and free T4 tested. You have already been diagnosed with Hashimoto, so I assume you don't need that test, but if you do, it's a TPO. At minimum, you should ask for at least that one. You also want to bring in a list of all medications and supplements you are on, and then take notes. And you may have some brain fog, so it is best to write things down or bring a friend with you to hear that information for you as well.
Yeah, I really like that suggestion. Mm-hmm. And that's often good, even for other medical conditions, to have a friend come along.
Oh, yeah. If you're feeling overwhelmed at all, have someone with you so that you can make sure that you heard everything right.
Right. And then remember things.
Yeah. Don't settle for a doctor who tells you that your numbers look good. If you're not feeling well, find a doctor that will treat your symptoms and how you feel, as well as your lab work. And make sure that you're getting your free T3, free T4, reverse T3 tested along with the TSH. Ask to have your iron levels checked, including ferritin, and also make sure that they check your B12, folate, vitamin D, and your hemoglobin A1C. Those are all really important tests for you to have done because they're a good indicator of your overall health. And then make sure you ask for a copy of your blood tests so you can see for yourself where your numbers are on your lab work. Keep track of your lab work and results every time you have them done so you can look for patterns. And make sure you have your lab work done at the same time every time you get it done. So if you go to the doctor in the morning and have your labs done in the morning, make sure every time you go in, you have it done at the same time so that your patterns are, correlated with that time. And developing a good relationship with your doctor is very important. You don't want to go into their office in tears or complaining that you can't lose weight or that you're just not feeling well. You have to word your symptoms in a way that they can hear you, yet not look at you as if you are a complainer or a whiner. As if you go in saying, I just don't feel good, and I've done that before. Sometimes you're so overwhelmed, you finally get to a place where somebody's going to listen to you, and then you just fall apart. It's okay, but a lot of times they'll offer to put you on an antidepressant rather than try to help you figure out what's going on. So you kind of want to be careful with that. So good luck, Deanne. I hope that your appointment goes well.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And now Sarah asks, I enjoy your podcast. It's very informative. My question is about plant-based diets and wondering if they would be better than a paleo diet to help with Hashimoto's. If I'm not eating meat or dairy or processed food, I probably would be getting fewer hormones and antibiotics because of what is given to animals.
This is a good point. And that's why we suggest eating as clean as possible. So that means getting organic and pastured local meats if you can. If not, you maybe do want to cut back on the amount of protein that you're eating and eat, the paleo diet really isn't all about eating meat. It's about eating a lot of healthy food, and that means a lot of vegetables and a small amount of meat, which is, what everybody should be doing anyways.
And healthy fats.
And healthy fats, yes. Plant-based diets will work for a short-term detox, but you do need the animal fats to process fat-soluble hormones. And all the grains in a plant-based diet might be doing more harm than good. Since wheat proteins and thyroid proteins are similar, the body ends up attacking the thyroid proteins. So you probably want to avoid as many grains as possible. And also vegan diets tend to be higher in carbohydrates. And many people with thyroid problems already have blood sugar regulation issues. So eating a lot of vegetables with a little bit of meat and a good portion of fats would be ideal. And conventional factory farm meat and dairy are not ideal, so you are right there. The basic principle of the paleo diet and lifestyle is to eat a sustainable diet and eat those sustainable products whenever possible. So, like I said before, buying meat from local farmers and shopping farmers markets and buying seasonal produce, and all those things are going to do you a lot of good to help clean up your body and start the healing process.
Yeah, that is great advice. And it just reminded me of our conversation with Epic Bar co-founder Taylor Collins in the last episode, and how he wants to really have an impact on the world through sustainable farming. And so there are farmers like that out there. So it's not only good for you and your family and your health, of course, but good for the environment.
Mm-hmm. Right. So thanks, Sarah. I hope you feel better